Political parties are calling for President Ramaphosa to step down following the revelations about the theft at his Phala Phala farm in Limpopo.
President Ramaphosa has been asked to explain the money that was stolen from his game farm in 2020.
The former spy boss, Arthur Fraser, claims that around $4 million in cash was stolen and alleges that a cover-up was then hatched.
Fraser claims that the president was involved in defeating the ends of justice, kidnapping of the suspects, interrogating and bribing them, and then concealing the crime from police.
President Ramaphosa has questions to answer on several fronts.
This incident on the Phala Phala farm shows a woeful disregard for law and also ethics.
I think the president needs to come out very clearly and tell South Africa where this money came from, who it came from, and whether the South African Revenue Services and the South African Reserve Bank processes were followed. It's as simple as that. Also, why it wasn't reported to the police.
The presidency and the president himself are being so evasive. It just leaves even more time for South Africans to make up their minds about it.
We're in a situation now with more questions than answers.
I think the longer the president stays silent on this matter, the more the vacuum is going to be filled by speculation.
Was he at the briefing? Yeah. Was he at the briefing? Yes. So, what was the briefing that had to do with the story? Exactly. She wanted the questions. Because some have to do, literally, like, mom said, come to 10 that was called
Hello, how are you doing today? Nice to see you again. Nice to see you.
Good morning, folks. Thanks for us. The purpose of this press briefing is to set out the steps that the DA has taken in response to serious allegations of impropriety against President Cyril Ramaphosa in wake of the Dollargate matter. My name is Cilliers Brink. I am joined by Joe McGluwa, DA Deputy Minister in the Shadow Minister in the Presidency, Ashor Sarupen, DA Shadow Minister for Appropriations, and of course the DA leader, John Steenhuisen, who will address you shortly. Just in introduction, the DA has taken 9 more steps to ensure that the President is held accountable for his failure to publicly disclose all of the relevant details surrounding the theft of $4 million from his Phala Phala residence in 2020, a revelation which has cast serious doubt on his integrity, that of the Presidency, and has led to real public mistrust. As the opposition, we have a duty to uphold the Constitution and its principles of equality before the law, as well as accountability. They are essential prerequisites for a functional democracy, and we will not be allowing them to be sacrificed. It is alleged that President Ramaphosa committed money laundering, tax evasion, corruption, kidnapping, bribery, and contravened several laws to recoup millions of dollars stolen from where they were hidden, apparently in a piece of furniture, and the cover-up of the saga. That President Cyril Ramaphosa is a better option for president than Jacob Zuma or Didi Mabuza, and that this scandal was exposed by a character as dubious as Arthur Fraser does not exonerate Ramaphosa from having to face the South African people. These are serious allegations that will continue to do enormous harm to our economy and our prospects of attracting investment and creating jobs, as well as the credibility of the office of the President. President Ramaphosa should end his silence and be honest with the South African people about his involvement in the Dollargate matter. That the matter is being investigated is no justification at all for his refusal to answer many of the reasonable questions which have arisen in this matter. There are 9 steps that the DA has taken in light of the fact that the leadership of the South African police has also now been directly implicated in this matter, and that doubt has been cast on the credibility of the SAPS leadership. The Namibian police confirmed last week that they had met with their South African counterparts on the border near Noordoever to share operational information pertaining to the theft, and that they dropped the matter after SAPS failed to produce a case number. But even though the case was never formally reported, 2 sources within crime intelligence have revealed that all of the top police leadership knew about the robbery and were involved in an off-the-record investigation and essentially a cover-up. This includes crime intelligence boss Peter Jacobs, then National Police Commissioner Ketla Sitole, and newly appointed National Police Commissioner Fane Masemola. I will now hand over to John Steenhuisen to set out the steps which the DA has taken.
It's now been several weeks since the Phala Phala story broke, and we are no closer to receiving any indication from the President, his version of events, his side of the story. Instead, he's gone to ground and is using the so-called ongoing investigation as a way to avoid answering the tough questions that the media, that the opposition, and that citizens are asking themselves. Now, this may well be good advice legally for the President, but politically this is disastrous, because into the President's silence is the story is starting to emerge and various parts of the puzzle are starting to be displayed. And this is obviously not looking good for the President. We believe that even on his own version of events before he was told to stay silent, that there are serious questions that he needs to answer. As the Namibian angle starts to develop, as the local angle starts to develop, it's becoming more and more clear that the President's decision to remain silent is frankly not sustainable for a day longer, and that he needs to take South Africa and its citizens into his confidence. This is not some corporate head. This is not some CEO of a business enterprise. This is not some small business manager. This is the President of the Republic of South Africa. The same President who raised his hands at the Union buildings and sought to uphold the Constitution and all other law of the Republic. It is very clear here that the President stands accused of violating a number of these laws, which he has now, which he had sworn to uphold, and which he has now gone silent on. The longer the silence continues, the more damage is being done to the South African economy, both locally and internationally. The President had a lot to say about all these businesses that are waiting to invest in South Africa, and one wonders what they must see when flashed on the CNN and BBC channels is a President and head of state with piles of currency that is not his own country's currency and furniture at his farm. So in light of that, we have decided that the President may well try and stay silent. But as the opposition, it's our duty not to stay silent. And like we pursued Mr. Zuma, and like people within the ANC pursued Mr. Zuma, and like Parliament pursued Mr. Zuma, we need to make sure that that pressure is kept up. And as Cilliers has said, just because Mr. Ramaphosa may be the preferred person in the ANC for people, if we look back at first principles, it shouldn't matter who the President of the Republic of South Africa is. The law must apply to them equally. They must be above reproach, and they must stick to the values and principles and the oath of office that they took and swore to uphold. So in light of that, these 9 steps have been taken. Some of them are parliamentary action steps. Some of them will be steps that involve outside agencies. And the first one I can announce is that I've written to the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, to request that they investigate allegations of possible money laundering by the President. Specifically, we've requested that the FBI considers investigating the source of the funds and whether the money was brought into South Africa legitimately and declared to the appropriate authorities. We've also recommended that the ledgers or journals which recorded the alleged sale of wild game at an auction be requested from the President to determine the identities of those involved in the suspicious cash transactions. A cash transaction within South Africa involving $4 million is deeply suspicious, and more so that since then that the cash was allegedly stashed in furniture, and its theft investigated off the record and subsequently covered up. Ashor.
The second step that we are taking is based on the fact that information has subsequently come to light about the alleged use of stolen funds by the suspect, as has been revealed in News 24 and elsewhere. And this raises some very serious concerns about the robustness of SARS and the South African financial intelligence system, which we have always been told and made to believe is very good at detecting fraud, corruption, and the proceeds of illicit activities. And it raises some very serious red flags. So things that we need to consider here is, how were the suspects able to convert currency without having to do any declarations about it being flagged by any of the authorities? How were transactions concluded in cash without a declaration of source of funds or any questioning there? And South Africa is already non-compliant with the requirements of the International Financial Action Task Force requirements. And these failures are present in this matter and a risk to the South African financial system. So we have written to the Financial Intelligence Center to request that they investigate the various alleged financial transactions that have followed from the theft, including the purchase of several luxury vehicles in cash. The Financial Intelligence Center has the legislative mandate to identify the proceeds of crimes in terms of the Financial Intelligence Center Act, and they're given quite a wide berth to do that. So we've asked the following of the FIC. Did they detect any of these cash transactions in their systems? If so, what steps did they take to determine if these transactions were legitimate or the proceeds of crime? If they fail to detect these transactions, does that mean that our monitoring systems need a revamp? And if they failed to detect these transactions, then obviously we have asked if they will now investigate these matters now that they are in the public domain. Similarly, with SARS, and I think we all know in the information that has come to light about these motor vehicles being purchased by the suspects allegedly, that when you go to purchase a car, you've got to fill in paperwork for SARS. And it raises questions, how did SARS not pick this up? So we've put similar questions to SARS about the purchase of these motor vehicles and other cash transactions to determine if the system is robust as they say it is, or if citizens are filling in paperwork for nothing because the work actually isn't going on as it should be. Back to you, John.
Yeah, from the side of the oversight from the presidency, we've also decided to get to the brink of this. We've decided also to be smart and request some sight on the declaration of the financial interest of the president. Whether the president has done that, it remains to be seen. And specifically, what we also would like to know is that the president's game farm and his business activities conducted from Phala Phala, whether that has also been declared. And we are looking forward for that response in the midst of the silence of the president. And also, when it comes to the Executive Members Ethics Act 82 and also the Executive Ethics Code, every member in Parliament must declare to the Secretary particulars of their financial interest. And after 60 days of that promulgation, the members that take office should submit this documentation then. It is also important for the cabinet members and members of parliament to disclose this on a yearly basis. So what we would like to see in the midst of Parliament being up in flames is a copy of those, and whether the President has done so. And if not, we are also saying that they have to submit to the Secretary a statement to disclose on what basis that has not been done. So we will ask, they already submit a letter to the Secretary of the Cabinet in terms of the declaration of financial interest of the President.
We have also written to, the fifth step that we've taken is written to Advocate Koleka, the Acting Public Protector, to lay a formal complaint in terms of the Executive Members Ethics Act and to request her to investigate the alleged breaches of the Executive Ethics Code. President Ramaphosa may have breached the code by failing to report the theft, which he was by law obliged to do so, and by using public resources, specifically the VIP Protection Unit, within the SAPS to track down and bring back the stolen private dollars. The Public Protector is, by virtue of the Executive Members Ethics Act, the complaint receptacle for complaints of breach of the Executive Members Ethics Act, as well as policing of the code therefore. And so it is the duty then for that office to decide whether there has been a breach and to initiate any particular investigation for breach of that and then to report on that. We've also written to the National Police Commissioner, Fanny Masemola, asking him the following questions. 1. Why was the Major General Wally Rueda sent to Namibia? Why was no formal case opened? Why was the theft covered up? And what did the investigation cost the taxpayers through public expenditure on what was essentially a recouping of the private dollars of the President? The seventh step that we've taken is that we've written through Advocate Glynis Breitenbach to the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services, Mr. Gratitude Magwanishe, to summon the Minister of Justice to explain why South Africa didn't respond with a case number and therefore assets that had been confiscated by the Namibian Department of Justice and Policing Services had to be released. He has agreed in principle, pending permission from Parliament. We note as well the statement released by the Justice Ministry today that's saying that they received no such request. Well, I think this is even more important why Parliament needs to summon the Minister, because the Namibian government says they made a request, the South African government says they didn't. We need to establish who is telling the truth here, and copies of the correspondence need to be made available so that we can get to the bottom of this particular aspect. I'll also be liaising with my opposition colleagues in Namibia for them to start a set of written questions to the Department of Justice in their country to see if they can access that correspondence as well. The eighth step that we've taken is writing to the Minister of Public Works about the subsequent security upgrades at the President's Phala Phala farm, because the SAPS VIP Protection Unit said that after this break-in that extensive work was done on the farm, whether they were paid for in full or in part using public funds. The ninth step that we've taken is through Andrew Whitfield MP. We've written to Tina Jumak-Peterson, the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee overseeing the police, requesting that Major General Rueda appear before the committee. In his affidavit, Mr. Fraser alleges that the President sent Rueda, the head of his VIP Protection Unit, to travel to Namibia to conduct a secret investigation and or interrogation into those who are allegedly involved in the burglary and theft of the President's private property. It is possible, indeed likely, that this private investigation of the theft was never formally reported to the SAPS and was done so using public funds at the taxpayer's expense. Mr. Rueda needs to provide an account to Parliament of what had occurred in relation to him and or the Protection Unit travelling to Namibia on the President's instructions and clearly on the President's private business. The DA has already written to the South African Reserve Bank and the South African Revenue Services requesting investigations into these allegations, and we have submitted a series of written questions to the President in Parliament and urged him to come clean on this particular matter. It's now becoming increasingly clear why President Ramaphosa has been so reluctant and so slow to remove many of the bad eggs from his cabinet and other key institutions of state. He's been trying to keep the so-called Smolenyana skeletons from tumbling out of his own closet. The saga lays bare the fact that the ANC is rotten from the head down, and even as it takes its dying breaths, decomposition has already set in. In 2024, the era of the ANC majority will end, and voters need to replace this extractive government with one that puts the national interest ahead of party and private interests, and that spends public money on truly delivering a better life for all. The DA leads by example in this regard. In the Western Cape, within a few months of assuming office, all MECs, as well as the Premier, completed and filled out independently conducted lifestyle audits, which make sure that members of Parliament, members of the executive, are not living above their means. And this is an important step, we believe, in providing clarity. And it's for that reason, as well as Joe McGluwa has said, that we will be seeking access to the President's declaration to the Secretary of Cabinet in order for us to be able to ascertain whether Phala Phala was ever declared and whether the business interests and monies accrued from the conducting of that business have ever been declared. It's also important to understand that the Constitution makes it clear that the President and members of the Cabinet may not undertake any other paid work. And again, I raise my concern that we have a country in absolute crisis, with food prices spiraling out of control, with the petrol price going through the roof, with the cost of living for ordinary South Africans increasing daily, and through an inflation crisis, an electricity crisis, and now a credibility crisis in government. We need a president whose full-time attention is focused on the people of South Africa and getting us through this particularly hard time that we are facing. Not a president with one eye on his farm, one eye on his dollars, and one eye on the work of the President of the Republic of South Africa. The DA is going to therefore pursue every possible angle to hold President Ramaphosa to account for the saga. The rule of law, equality before the law, accountability, and the separation of party and state are core non-negotiables of the Democratic Alliance, and we would argue are core components of any successful democracy. And they are the only foundation upon which a prosperous, united South Africa can be built. No one should be above the law, least of all a sitting president. In fact, the president should be setting the example for the rest of the country. And this is why we believe it's important that he is pursued to the full extent of the law, and that the media, opposition parties, civil society, and ordinary citizens keep demanding of their president a full and proper disclosure so that we can make up our own minds on where the situation needs to go further. Thank you.
Thank you, John, Joe, and Ashor. We will now take questions from members of the media. I ask only that you indicate your name, the institution that you represent, and we'll take questions in sets of three. Let's go. Sir, for now, please go ahead.
It's Phala from the SABC. Mr. Steenhuisen, some of these steps that you have announced, one could assume that these could be part of the investigation of the criminal case that is being opened. Do you not have faith in those processes? Is that why you're choosing to pursue these angles on your own? And once you have this information, all this information you have in your possession, what do you plan to do forward with that information to hold President Ramaphosa accountable in this Phala Phala saga?
Thanks very much.
Oscar Duma, I'm from Eyewitness News. So the first question is, before announcing whether the FBI should investigate this particular matter, has the DA established if they can actually investigate this particular matter? And the second question is, pending these investigations, No, the EFF has said that the president must actually step aside so that the investigations have some credibility. Is that a call that you also support?
Thank you. It's Govin from ENCA. You mentioned now that the Constitution doesn't allow members of the cabinet to undertake any other paid work. I just want to be explicitly clear here. Do you believe that the president has undertaken other paid work? And then secondly, you're referring to the public protector for investigation of the Executive Ethics Code on the basis that he didn't report the matter to the police. Is there any steps being taken in holding him accountable for allegedly violating his oath of office to uphold the Constitution by undertaking this paid work? Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's not us who don't have faith in the SAPS. It's clearly the president who's got no faith in the SAPS. For 2 years, he failed to report this matter. He failed to get a case number, despite the fact that he and his police minister consistently exhort ordinary citizens to report crime. They did not do this themselves. The president should quite easily by now be able to produce a CAS number, which every citizen gets when you open a case at the SAPS. Why would the president have used his VIP protection unit to go and conduct the investigation, not specialized units that deal with robbery, etc., within the SAPS? So I would advance that the president has shown no faith in there. I do not have faith that the SAPS are going to be able to investigate this to the full extent that it should be investigated. I think we've already seen that the capacity within SAPS to even to deal with some of the many white-collar crimes and crimes of corruption in terms of the Prevention of Organised Crime and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act that I and several other DA members have laid over the years, including against people like Mr. Fraser, have not been investigated. There's been no outcome to them. And it's very clear to me that there is a reluctance to prosecute or go after the big fish in South Africa. And so that is why we're looking at steps to ensure that we're able to support and supplement whatever investigation there is. In terms of the second question from EWN, yes, the FBI site is clear that where there's a use of dollars and those dollars cross borders, that they have a unit within there that deals with white-collar crime and the corrupt combating of money laundering and the like around the world, and particularly because it's a United States currency that's been used, which is not the currency of South Africa or any of its neighboring countries formerly. It sparked suspicion about, did those dollars leave a United States border? If so, how did that happen? How were those dollars obtained? And how did those dollars cross the South African border, and from which countries were they from? So this money could well be linked to serious issues on the continent or even abroad. And we need to understand where that money came from and how it got here.
So, Mr. Steenhuisen, so the allegation that it was dollars that were stolen from the president's Phala Phala farm came from Mr. Arthur Fraser. The presidency has not confirmed whether or not it was actually forged, but they've confirmed that money was stolen. So what basis then is the DA? Are you saying that you're believing everything that Arthur Fraser said? And then you're going to go to the FBI and say, look, Arthur Fraser said this, dollars are stolen, therefore investigate.
I'm believing it because the people who stole the money spent dollars. They paid for vehicles, for teeth grills, for other items, piece of property in US dollars. Now, if they had gone to a money lender and obtained those dollars, there would have to have been some report of it. The president has not denied that they were dollars. In fact, him and his supporters have come out and said that dollars are a regular feature of the game industry in South Africa. So I have no doubt that dollars were involved. I don't think that the people who stole the money, who then used dollar currency to purchase vehicles in contravention of FICA regulations, to pay service providers and to purchase property in violation of SARS and FICA requirements, would have been able to obtain that amount of dollars unless it was the proceeds of the crime that took place at Phala Phala. The Namibian authorities have also confirmed that it was dollars that these gentlemen were found with in Namibia. I think if it was in rands, the presidency would very easily have been able to come out and refute this thing from the beginning, saying, I've never had dollars at my property. I've never had foreign currency. He has not. Instead, we've seen subterfuge after subterfuge trying to explain away the fact that dollars are a normal transaction. But the Game Breeders Association, other people involved, have said it's very unusual to have cash at these auctions. The majority of these auctions are handled by EFT, including the latest one that took place at Phala Phala over this last weekend. In terms of the second part of the question, well, I think that the longer the president stays silent on this thing, I think the more people are going to call on him to step aside. We're not calling on him to step aside yet. We're saying to him, we want to give you the benefit of the doubt. Come clean. Tell us your side of the story. If you have indeed broken these laws, well, then you must be subjected to the same punishment as any other ordinary citizen. But for heaven's sake, you can't stay silent on this matter. Because the longer he stays silent, the more this thing is going to infect and poison the body politic. We've already seen the damage it's done in Parliament, with Parliament now returning back to the future with the Nkandla days, with the President being prevented from speaking, the Parliamentary Protection Services forcefully ejecting members of Parliament, members of the opposition being stifled from being able to exercise oversight and accountability on the President. And so if he continues to stifle the body politic and continues to infect the body politic through his abject silence, then I think those calls for him to go or to step aside are going to grow. I think that the right thing for the President to do is to take us into his confidence and give us his side of the story, and then let Parliament and the various other institutions in South Africa make the decision about whether he should be impeached, whether there should be a motion of no confidence in him, whether he should face the might of the law. Govan, I think that 96.1 is very clear about undertaking any other paid work. I think this is paid work. If you are running a game farm for profit, and those profits are accruing to you, that is paid work. He's certainly not running a charity there on Phala Phala. He's certainly not running an Ankole NGO. He's certainly not running, a conservation project. This is a big business, and clearly from the sums of money we're talking about, it is a very big business, which involves incredible profits and huge outlays. I would describe that as paid work. And it is part of the public protector submission that we have been making, and I think it is a part of the submission that others have made already in terms of that. And it's also why it's important that we get access to the President's declaration of interest to see whether those incomes and business operations have been declared to the Secretary to Cabinet. You may recall, we've been in this movie before, the famous FNB bond at Nkandla. We were told for months and years that there was a bond on the property, that no public money had been spent. However, when the truth outed eventually, we knew that that was not the case, and that hundreds of millions of rands of public money had been spent on the Nkandla upgrade. So I don't buy the subterfuge that's being spread out. I think that this thing really reeks at the moment, and the sooner the President comes out to clarify it, the better it's going to be for all of us. Yeah.
Agreeing that it's paid work. The DA believing that the President has breached his oath of office to uphold the Constitution?
Well, clearly that is the case, and the President's got no rational explanation for it. That is a breach of the oath of office. If you violated the law of the Republic, it is a breach of your oath of office. And it's an oath of office which all of us take. And if I undertake any paid work, I have to declare it to Parliament, and it is declared every year in my annual register. Even if somebody sponsors a flight for me to travel to the Ukraine or Somaliland, I have to declare that in my register. And I don't think that it is too much to ask that if the President is running businesses on the side that are clearly distracting him from the work of running the state, then I think that we have a right to know what they are and the extent of them. I don't think it's unreasonable in a democracy to expect that from the President. Thanks, Cilliers.
I just want to add in relating to what Govan is saying, and I would like us to put this on the record here today, that what we are seeing happening in our country today, and even with the previous presidency, there are no oversight towards or against or unto the presidency. There's no oversight portfolio committee. For the last 15 years, the DA has fought to have an oversight committee, and it fell on deaf ears. The presidency is a law unto itself. There's no portfolio committee, there's no oversight role, and Minister Gungubele has a free right in that position, and he only served there as a rubber stamp for the ruling party.
I just think, Governor, there's a further aspect to your question as well, which also forms part of the public protector complaint, and that's 96(2)(b, which says that they may not act in any way that is inconsistent with their office, and here's the important part, or expose themselves to any situation involving the risk of a conflict of interest between their official responsibilities and private interests. I would advance that using your VIP protection unit, which is paid for by you, me, and every other citizen in the country, to go and pursue private debts or private money is a clear conflict of interest between your personal business interests and your responsibilities as head of state. And I don't think that public funds should have been used to go and pursue money that was stolen in a private theft, particularly when it wasn't reported to the SAPS.
Thanks very much. We'll take a second round. Sir, I'm going to start with you. Ma'am, anyone else? You want to have a second bite? Right. Just remember name and publication.
Brian Sarupen from the Citizen. Mine is a follow-up question to the previous one, and that is that the DA has maintained for some time that President Ramaphosa is the only credible candidate within the ANC, presidential candidate. Now the question is, what happens if he leaves, paving the way for an RET candidate within the ANC?
Thank you.
I'm Zimzema from News 24. If I missed this, I'm sorry, but you said you went to the FBI. When was this request made, if I missed it? I'm sorry. And then the second part is, what has their response been? Have you received any response from them regarding this experiment?
Right.
So, Mr. Steenhuisen, you're saying that the president is keeping silent on this matter, but he has issued a statement saying that denying all the allegations that have been made against him, and further to that, he has said that he will be complying with any ongoing investigation into this particular case. You know that the Alta Fraser has already written he's already opened a criminal case with the police. So is that not enough for you? That kind of reasoning that's given by the president of saying he'd rather comply when the law enforcement agencies investigating this particular matter?
Well, I think we've been in this movie before. I'll start with your question first. And we were told all the time that Mr. Zuma was cooperating with the investigation into Nkandla. And we knew that, in fact, that wasn't the case, and that there was indeed a broad cover-up of what had happened at Nkandla. And it was only once the public protector intervened, Thuli Madonsela, that we were able to get to the bottom of just how wide and broad and deep that cover-up had taken place. The president's not acting like an innocent man who's got nothing to hide. If someone made that allegation about me, the first thing I would do is call a press conference with all of you, and I would deny the allegations. I would then produce the invoice from the animal that was allegedly sold and say, here is the invoice, this is who it was sold to, this is why they paid in dollars, this is how long I had the dollars for, and this is what I did with them. This is my CAS number with the SAPS reporting the crime. This is the findings of the investigation. Case open and shut. We could have avoided all of this pain and all of this nonsense that we've had to go through now in Parliament and in the public domain. But that has not happened. Surely the easiest way to make this thing go away, if you're an innocent person, is to just produce the evidence and give your side of the story. Instead, there is an initial statement. Then the president gets obviously been taken legal advice and has gone to ground and not said anything about it. And I can only believe that would be because your legal advice has told you you've already implicated yourself in your original statement. Don't say anything more. And as I said, that might be all fine and well if you're a CEO or a MD or a business owner. It's not okay if you're the president. There's an extra duty of care on you to level with the people who have elected you to lead their country and to take them into their confidence. So I would urge the president, I would be the first to apologize to him and say, sorry, we got it wrong. If he just produces the evidence, tells us who paid the money, how it ended up there, why he didn't open a case, and if there's legitimate answers to these things, well, we can put a lid on this thing and all move onwards. But I suspect that there's a lot more to the story than we know. And the other problem the president has is that it's very difficult for him now to poke holes in the credibility of Arthur Fraser. Because when the DA took Arthur Fraser and the president's decision to appoint him as the head of the Correctional Services Department to court, to review it as unreasonable and irrational, why would you appoint somebody who's under this huge cloud of the PAN project and who's caused so much chaos and drama at the State Security Agency? Why would you now essentially promote them into a higher paying job as the head of the Correctional Services Department? Well, I think now the story is starting to become a bit clearer about why that happened. But the president's fundamental problem is that he, under his own hand, under his own signature, deposed an affidavit to the court in that case, saying that Arthur Fraser was a fit and proper man, that he deserved the appointment, that he was the right man for the job. How do you now turn around and say, well, this guy's a terrible guy, when a couple of years before you were saying he's the best thing since sliced bread, and that's why you appointed him? So the president's in a real tight spot here now. The sooner he comes out, the better. In terms of Brian's question, thanks, Brian. It's not my job as leader of the opposition to pick winners and losers in the ANC. It's our job to ensure that the principles of accountability, transparency, equality before the law, respect for the rule of law, and upholding those oaths of office are upheld. And it shouldn't matter whether it's Jacob Zuma in office, Cyril Ramaphosa in office, John Steenhuisen in office, Julius Malema in office. Those things must apply equally. And I think we'll be doing a disservice to South Africa if we make this about personalities and not about principle. Because do we then turn a blind eye to what's happening here because we prefer Mr. Ramaphosa to Mr. Zuma, or we perhaps like him more than Mr. Mabuza? What message does that send? Well, be a people pleaser, be a nice guy, go for walks on the Sea Point Promenade, get involved in game breeding, and all sins will be forgotten because we kind of like you. Well, that's not how it works. In politics, it's about first principles. And I think the first principles here are what need to be defended by all of us in all spheres of South African life, because we need to make sure that our democracy is safeguarded and is prepared, yes, for a Mandela president, but also firewalled against a Zuma presidency. And that can only come through us ensuring that it's the values and principles. And frankly, if the president is guilty of these things, if the president has violated the law, if the president has received foreign currency under dubious circumstances, well, does that make him better than Didi Mabuza and others? I think that's a question we need to ask. But I prefer to divorce the personality and focus more on the principle. And I think that's what South Africa should be doing. I don't want to do business with somebody who is under a cloud of these types of allegations, which is even more reason why it's important that the president comes clean. Sorry,
it was Cilliers about.
My handwriting is so terrible.
I asked when
oh, okay, yes, great, thanks. Yeah, we wrote on the 20th of June, and I'll provide you with copies of the letters. They will all be in the email pack that goes out. We've not received a response yet. Hopefully they're slightly more efficient than the Department of Home Affairs.
Right. Any further questions? Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody.
COGTA deployment is at the root of corruption and state capture in this country.
It has institutionalized criminal elements.
It's become one big criminal syndicate and racket and protection operation.
It is a racketeering and organized crime operation.
It is a recipe for disaster. It is almost putting the fox in charge of the chicken house.
The ANC is the biggest beneficiary of COGTA deployment corruption.
How was it possible for these criminals to be appointed to positions of such power in the first place?
It's one of the biggest criminal stitch-ups in the history of South Africa.
It's impossible for anybody in the ANC to say they didn't know this was happening.
They knew what was going on, and they chose to do nothing about it.